About a year ago, me and some of my friends went out to celebrate my birthday. After going to a movie, one of my friends asked if I wanted to go to a club. I said sure, but everyone else wanted to go home, as they had to work the next day. We were all tired. My friend Katie, her cousin Megan, and I headed to the club. We were having a good time dancing and drinking a little bit. Then Katie saw a cute guy who she wanted to hook up with. She started steering our group over to his group, which was conveniently made up of him and two other dudes. We all get to chatting. It's relatively innocent, and then the boys ask us if we want to go to a bonfire at their work. They said a bunch of people would be there and it would be fun. I was a little nervous, but Katie was really feeling this guy, so I decided why not. We left the club and followed the three guys about 20 minutes away by car. The distance was starting to really sketch me out, but I tried to stay relaxed. We pulled up to this huge chain wire fence with a gate, and the guys typed in a code on the box that opened the gate. We drove through, and the gate closed behind us. I looked around, but saw no bonfire and no other people. Now I was really starting to get scared. We were in a solitary enclosed space with three strange men, but everyone was smiling and laughing as we got out of the car, and I figured I was probably being paranoid. The boys said that their co-worker had bailed and they were really sorry. I asked where we were, and the guys told us that we were at a haunted house, not the paranormal kind, but the fake Halloween kind, which was currently out of season since it was May. He worked there in the fall, so he had the code. He asked us if we wanted to take a tour through the house and see the behind the scenes of how it all works. I thought that sounded really cool, and we all agreed. He led us into the actor's room, where the scarers would hang out. A door in it led to this sort of maze of back pathways where the actors could run through the house unseen and jump out in various locations at visitors. Now I should mention that by this point the three guys had each selected a girl with whom they were trying to score with. The guy who had chosen me was Brian. He was average looking, about 6 feet, dark hair. He seemed a little odd, like he didn't really know the other two that well, but they were all friends, so whatever. As we begin walking through the main pathway of the haunted house, Megan and the guys she's with disappear in the back pathways. Suddenly, all the lights go off and fog appears, and the music and noises of the house start. I knew that the two of them had gone and turned on the house, but that didn't make it any less scary. I was now in an off-season haunted house alone with three strange guys, one of who was using the darkness as an excuse to grab onto me. Even though I kept pushing him off, I held onto the back of Katie's shirt, scared to death I would lose her in the maze of hallways and be stuck alone with Brian. I was desperate to get out of the house, unsure where Megan or the other guy she was with were, or if they were going to pop out and scare us, or if they were even okay. But it felt like no matter where we turned, we weren't moving anywhere. We kept passing through this same room. I thought to myself, how in the hell can I get out of this thing? Katie and her dude were obviously having a lot more fun than I was, and they giggled and walked ahead of us around the corner. When I followed them around the turn, they were gone. Now I was truly alone with Brian. He wrapped his arm tightly around my waist, and I pulled back, saying, "Hey, I'm really scared. I want to get out of this house. How do we get out?" He told me he didn't know. I responded, "Don't you work here?" "No," he said. "I just met those two guys at the club tonight." Alarms were sounding in my head, and I was in full panic mode. I took my phone out of my pocket and texted Katie, "Where the fuck are you?" I wanted to get out of here. Before I started pushing my way through the rest of the house, finally, after what felt like hours of endless turns and hallways, and Brian grinding accidentally against me and asking, "Why are you freaking out? Relax." I found the exit door. As I pushed through it into the open air of the outdoors, I felt a little better. Outside of the haunted house, I tried to reason with myself that these guys were probably harmless, and I was being silly. I checked my phone, but Katie hadn't texted back yet. I decided I was going to sit by the car and wait for them to return from wherever they were. Brian kept trying to talk me into walking with him somewhere else, but I refused. He checked his phone and said, "Oh, so-and-so texted me. He and Katie are out by the lake. You want to go there?" I desperately wanted to reunite with my friend, who had the car keys, and get the fuck out of here, so I agreed. We headed down a dark pathway towards the lake, and when we got there, I didn't see anyone. I called out for Katie, but heard no response. Brian said, "Oh, they must have left already and gone back to the house or something. I'll text so-and-so to come back." I sat down on a picnic table to wait, and that's when Brian made his move. He sat beside me and then leaned over and aggressively kissed me, placing my hand on his groin, which was rock hard already. I pulled back and politely said, "No thank you, I'm not in the mood." "Come on, just for a bit," he urged, placing my hand once more on his crotch. I stood up and walked a few steps away, shaking my head. Brian's expression changed. His eyes darkened and his mouth set into a hard line. He stood up and started pacing back and forth in front of me. "You've been fucking leading me on all night, you tease. Why do the other two get the girls who are DTF while I'm stuck here with you? All you girls are the same. I'm not good enough. I'm never good enough." Then he turned to look at me and said something that sent shivers down my spine. "You know, a lot of guys wouldn't be so nice to you, out here alone. A lot of guys wouldn't give you a choice." My phone beeping as he finished speaking, and I looked down and it was a text from Katie saying, "We're in the back office watching a movie. We've been here the whole time. Come join." Katie had never been at the lake. Brian had made that text up to get me out here alone. At this point, I was more frightened than I had ever been, but I didn't want to give that away. I didn't want to give Brian the satisfaction of knowing he had scared me, so I turned and walked back to the haunted house with Brian, about 15 feet behind. When I got back to the office, I told Katie and Megan, who were cuddled up on the floor with the other two guys, that I wanted to leave, and Katie promised we would in a few minutes. I asked for the car keys at least, so I could go sit in the car and avoid Brian, who was standing in the office corner with his arms crossed. I went to the car and sat in the back seat with the doors locked for over an hour, texting Katie every few minutes, begging her to hurry up. It was now 4:30 a.m. and I was scared, tired, and cold. At one point, Brian walked toward the car from the office, standing about 8 feet away and just staring at me. I kept the doors locked and avoided making eye contact. Finally, at 5 a.m., Katie and Megan walked out to the car and we leave. I get home and pass out from exhaustion. When I wake up, I have a Snapchat friend request. When I check it, it was from Brian X21. Apparently, Katie thought we hit it off and gave him my Snapchat name. Needless to say, I blocked his Snapchat and I no longer speak to Katie. I was lucky that nothing truly bad happened that night. But when I think of what could have been, when I think about Brian's voice and that threat behind his words, my heart still skips a beat. It was October 31st, 2017, around midnight. It was raining and I was sitting on my couch watching YouTube on the TV. My dog began to whine as he needed to go outside. Frustrated, I sighed, got up, threw on my flip-flops and grabbed an umbrella. As I opened the door onto my porch, I immediately became aware that I was hearing something odd. It was a steady tone, slightly muffled by the fact that none of the windows were open, and it immediately made me uneasy. I stepped out on my porch, and the noise became louder. It was then that I realized I was hearing whistling. I went from uneasy to confused. I tried to peer around into the inky darkness around me, but had no luck. So I reached into the house and flicked on the porch light, and that's when I saw him. It was this guy, and he had his face painted to look like a puppet. He stood in the corner of my yard and whistled. The confusion turned into annoyance as I realized this guy must have been trying to mess with me as a Halloween prank. So I walked to the big glass door on my porch, opened it, and with all the class I had been raised with, simply asked, "Dude, what's wrong with you?" The whistling stopped immediately, and he slowly turned his head to look directly at me. He gave a hollow laugh before turning on his heels and stiffly walking away, with almost a soldier-like movement. I shrugged, then turned to handle my dog, when I realized that my normally aggressive dog was now hidden underneath a table whining and having wet himself. The next day at school, I heard whispers in the hallway of him. Conversations during class. Apparently, I hadn't been the only one to see this guy, and apparently he was quite the mover, as he had been seen all over town around midnight specifically. Can I explain what happened that night? Not specifically. I can't be sure of it, but what I can say is, it was certainly one of the oddest situations that had ever happened to me. This happened to me when I was a teenager, probably around 15. Some background to the story. I hate clowns. I have always, and always will. I'm not 100% sure why, but they creep me out and make my skin crawl. However, over the years, I've found that this is a general consensus among most people, as I have rarely met someone who loves clowns. So my friend and I had just finished watching a movie at the movie theater that was inside our local mall. The movie ran late and probably finished around 10. The mall closed at 9. So it was dark and all the stores had their gates down, and it had a spooky enough feel about it already. The doors were not locked from the inside, so we walked through the mall to the other side, which had the doors to the trail we took to walk back home. Nothing was out of the ordinary until we got to our exit. Now, since this was the early 2000s, the mall still had payphones, and they were in a little foyer area. I don't know what else to call it, really. So there was one set of doors, then the foyer with the payphones, and then a second set of doors to go outside. We opened the first set of doors, and sitting there was a fully dressed clown. I'm talking big, red floppy shoes, comically oversized pants, and face paint. The man in this awful costume was middle-aged, probably in his 50s. He was not on the phone. He was just hanging out there. We hurry past him as I'm breaking out into a cold sweat and go through the double doors to the parking lot, and he follows us. I'm about to pass out and die at this point, since him just being a clown was creepy enough, but now that he's also a middle-aged man following two 14-year-old girls outside adds a whole nother element to it. He's calling out behind us, and we're ignoring him. He continues to try to get our attention, and we start picking up speed. As he gets closer, I try listening to what he's saying, and he's literally just talking nonsense. I catch a phrase here and there. One of the things I can make out is him talking about how it's a full moon, and look how big it is. But he's talking to us, not himself. We make it to the other end of the parking lot, but this is the part where we head into the woods to cut through the trail to head home, so I definitely didn't want this man to follow us into the woods. We made some sharp turns and hid behind the car, and after a while, we lost sight of him, and hopefully he had lost sight of us, and we hauled ass into the woods. Thankfully, we escaped unscathed, except for the creepy memory.